You are Rob Hopkins, so you are co-founder of the Transition Network, which is accompanying cities in the transition to a low-carbon future. You also wrote a book, like a new book on the subject, which is called From What Is to What If, Unleashing the Power of Imagination to Create the Future We Want. Mm-hmm. And you were also in the movie Demain, which is very famous in France.
And Xavier Pavie, you're professor at ESSEC and director of the Imagination Center. Your work as a philosopher deals mostly with innovation and how to handle it from a philosophical point of view. And you recently wrote a new book on this subject, which is called Philosophy Critique of Innovation and Innovators.
And Luc and I, we are part of the movement which is called ESSEC Transition. And so it's the student movement created a year ago in the wake of the Fridays for Future marches, and also in the student manifesto for a wake-up call on the environment. So we work around projects that anyone can join at any time, basically. And the main project was at the start of a student initiative on the core courses. So the idea was transform the way we are being educated and prepare us to the climate crisis and the changing future.
How do we set up our mind? What are the tools to imaginate this future in a desirable way?
I feel like when we live in a time when so much of the messaging around climate change, as you say, is very dark and frightening and apocalyptic. In many ways, they absolutely have the science on their side. You know, it's Paul Hawken, who I admire, who wrote a book called Drawdown, who's an environmentalist. He once said, if you've read the science about climate change and you're not a pessimist, then you haven't read it properly. Go back and read it again. But if you've spent any time among the movements around the world that are trying to do something about it, and you're not an optimist, then you don't have a heart. And my sense is that I noticed, as somebody who has done public speaking about climate change for a long time, that it's really interesting to watch people's body language. That when I would do 20 minutes of graphs and pictures about how terrible everything is, people they lean physically, they go back, and they kind of. Whereas when you tell stories about things that people are doing and possibilities, and people lean into the conversation that you're having, and for me, I feel like I said in the talk, that one of the key things that we need to be doing is to be creating longing. It's such a powerful word, longing. You know, how do you create that sort of yearning for a different future, and how it would be? Because if we don't, you can't create a longing for catastrophe. You know, you create a longing for something that's delicious and beautiful and connected and vibrant and colourful and gorgeous. And actually that feels to me like again, like I said, you know, when we went to the moon in 1969, we didn't just randomly say, let's go to the moon. You know, we had been telling stories and dreaming and singing songs about going to the moon for 50, 60, 70 years. Jules Verne went to the moon, Tintin went to the moon, everybody, Frank Sinatra went to the moon, everybody went to the moon. So by the time we actually made it happen, we had that longing to make it, and it became inevitable that that's what would happen. So for me, what I try to do in the work I do is to say, how do we use storytelling? How do we capture things that are already happening? Because this isn't like magic that just exists in Rob Hopkins' head. You know, this is something that is happening all over the place. So it's how do we bring that alive? And then when we do that, it's not that we just go into a kind of giddy, optimistic sort of cult of it's all going to be glorious, but whenever we have the conversations about what the science is telling us is going to happen, most of that is the worst case scenario, is the scenario is if we do nothing. But actually we could do stuff, we could do it could be amazing, we could mobilize, and we could put the energy in and create something extraordinary.
What is positive things today? What is to encourage students, for instance, entrepreneurs, to do things? And the problem is, the last probably 50 years, the only way to be positive, optimist, is the growth. And everything was positive only if you got a very good result. So at the end of the year, at the end of the month, you get a better salary, you have a better profit, a better bonus, and that's it. So the question of what you mentioned, that what is very positive, desirable, and so on and so forth, it's not in our mindset nowadays. In our mindset, or how we Maybe we teach, we talk in the media, for instance, in a classroom as well. It's not about, think about listening birds. It's not about having a good time in a park. It's how is it possible to have a better result, a better turnover, a better profit. So what you mentioned about the mindset is, you're perfectly right. The question is, how could we twist the mindset in order to make sure that this kind of thing will be in our mind, in our hands, in our thoughts when we want to accomplish something. And for that, we certainly have to, when I mentioned that many times, it's a question of the philosophy, which is, what do you really want to do in your life? What do you want to achieve in your life? And in your life, it's probably not to have a better profit margin.
Today, why did you decide, for example, to talk about responsible innovation? It's really to create like a new way of thinking, a new way of proceeding, because if we do not try to build a new future and to tell new stories, it can be hard like to project ourselves in a future that may seem grim and so on. Mm-hmm. So which stories would you like to tell us and anyone so that we can, I don't know, gather around these stories and create a new future?
Who is one of the best storytellers the last couple years? Steve Jobs was on stage and he will tell you a story about the last iPhone. Or maybe Starbucks coffee, and Howard Schultz will tell a story about the story of the coffee, from the bean to the cup and how to do it. So actually the storytelling is probably used not for the bad reason, but actually for what kind of end, which is very important. And if we talk about innovation, most of the people, globally speaking, they are excited about it. Artificial intelligence, the last smartphones, the new car, the new motorcycle, going to Mars, for instance. Everybody is very exciting about it. But they just think about a very short term. Mm-hmm. And the very short term is, what can I get? What can I get? How it will actually improve my comfort in my life. I will get a cab actually thanks to my apps. That's amazing. I will see a film whenever I want, or a series whenever I want, wherever I want, thanks to the Netflix one, as well as on the apps or somewhere else. But I don't know if everybody knows that Netflix itself is 14% of the internet broadband, which is amazing. And the planet cost for that, it's terrible. So actually, when you think about the very short time, having Netflix on his mobile phone, it's just amazing. We want to do that. We are very excited to have it. But who think about the side effect of it? To me, that's the main problem of the innovator. Because the innovators is just, how could we give an answer of needs? So I will give an answer about what you want to do. I want to have a better or bigger screen, the touch screen itself. The problem is to produce it. You need to get some rare earth. So that's one of the issue. So basically, if I ask to the consumer, if I ask to the user, definitely, he will ask you for something else, something better. The innovator will do that. The problem is, it will be a success in terms of the commercial aspect. But what about the rest? What are the bad effects of innovation? And the last 50 years, we did an amazing job on innovations. We can launch whatever product, wherever you want at the same period of time. You want something, we will give you within the next months. We did an amazing job and works in terms of what we call it the innovation process management. The problem is we never integrate into this process this notion of responsibility, which is something, to go back to your question, that I worked for. And the last 10 years, I tried to integrate the notion of responsibility, philosophical questions, into the innovation process management at each different stage. And just to let Rob to answer to this question as well, one of the first questions is, should we give an answer to every single need? It's not creation of need. The requirements or the expectation for the customers is enough. We don't need to create needs. People have lots of needs. No need to create them. But the question is, should we give an answer to every single need? When you know that you will have a bad effect or a side effect, should we give an answer? Probably not. And the consumer or the user, the client, does not know that. They are not scientific. They don't know how to produce it. They don't know every single thing. So it's too easy to say that it's your responsibility as user. The first responsibility belongs to the innovator because he knows what he's doing.
Is that storytelling is a way to engage people that's very, very different from from information. If I told a story and I said, oh, there was this delicious cinnamon croissant, the part of your brain that would activate when you smell a cinnamon croissant activates when I tell you about it. If I said, that you kicked a football, the part of your brain that would actually activate when you kicked the football would so there is something about telling stories that holds us and engages us in such a different way. So what I try and do, my role in the transition movement as much as anything is being a kind of a bee that collects stories and cross-pollinates these stories and looks out for stories of something happening here and something happening there. And one of the things that I do when I do big talks sometimes is to say we all need to become storytellers, and we need the stories of how ordinary people in university who are inspired by transition, who went on the school strikes and then decided we want to start transition here. How did they start? What was that bit like when they said, yeah, should we meet on Thursday and do it? There's one of the people I interviewed in the book was this woman who's an author called Alexandra Rowland, who says all great stories start with somebody somewhere drunk in a bar saying, I bet it can be done though. I bet it can be done. I don't know how yet, but I bet it can be done. And so I do a thing when I do talks where I say, what we need are those stories of how people got started. So I say, so now we're going to tell a story, and we do it as an activity, and we say the imagination thrives when it has limits, so we can use the alphabet as a limit. So there was somebody called Alexandra, and Alexandra lived in Bruges, and Bruges, what was her job? She was a carpenter, and she was obsessed with, what was she obsessed with? Donuts. And then you tell this whole story about then who she met and how they started transition, and you tell this completely ridiculous story that gets all the way to Z based on people's ideas, but it is a story, and you've created a story, and people lean in to that because it's exciting. And because we are fundamentally like he talks about in Sapiens, we are a storytelling creature. That ability to ask what if is what distinguishes us from other life on the planet. That's how we've kind of built what we have, is because we ask what if. So for me, becoming storytellers, putting storytelling central into the movements that we tell, that we create. And it's one of the things I've loved about Extinction Rebellion. My wife is very active in Extinction Rebellion. She's been arrested 4 times now in the different actions in London. And I love how they take a space, they occupy a space, they don't get anyone's permission, they hold a space, and then they fill it with something else, and they turn it into a forest or a market or a whatever. We need to be creating those stories, but also making them 3-dimensional in our everyday life.
Talking about the impact of these stories, there is in the recent mobilization movement this idea of doing something together, and not only as citizens or individual acting alone and separately. How we can go out from a story which is the self-made man.
Because we know now that story is deeply toxic and deeply unhealthy. We're living in the time that sociologists are calling the epidemic of loneliness. We have an epidemic of anxiety. We are a social creature. In Bristol, where they have the Bristol pound, the local currency that Transition Bristol started, they did really interesting research that showed that if you go shopping with Bristol pounds, you have something like 20 more conversations than you would have if you went shopping with plastic. There's very famous research from America that shows people who go shopping in a farmer's market have 20 or 30 more conversations than they have when they go around the supermarket. We have designed an economy that atomizes everybody. We have a social media culture where we all are isolated down into little bubbles of people who agree with us, and anything we can do to break out of that. One of the things I love about being involved in transition where I live is that I'm involved with projects that I run with people politically who I don't necessarily have very much in common with at all, but we're working together on a project which is local, we wouldn't meet apart from that. So one of the most important things, if we want to make the communities and the economies where we live more resilient, we have to start with conversation and connection. And I don't feel like that narrative of the self-made, isolated person, I see less and less people really buying into that narrative anymore. because we can see the mental health cost that is having across society is just terrifying.
Yeah, I'm saying that because it's something present in our culture, in the movies we can see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Doing something just on your own, going to your job, going back home, and what you're going to do? Maybe practice sports, and what else? Maybe having a family, that's fine, but it was for just a very short period of time of your life, actually, because when your kids actually growing, they will get their independence. So what is my role on earth for a certain period of time? What is my really role on earth? Is it to increase the market share of the company? Is it to change my job and to get a better payroll? What is my purpose? And I truly believe that the climate change issue could be a very good thing to reconnect people, because actually that's a common good. So, and you know that we call it in innovation sometimes the creation and destruction, creative destructions. And if we destroy something, that's a good opportunity to create something else. And probably that people will reconnect or connect to the dot amongst the different skills of the people, techniques of the people, as well as they just want to share things with each other for a specific goal. And the goal cannot be having a better payroll, increase the market share. Definitely not. It should be something bigger.
We're in a business school, and my sense is that there's a business that I started in my town. We started a brewery, and from the beginning, we wanted it to be a transition social enterprise brewery. And from the very beginning, we wanted to build a community around the brewery. So we had a membership, we did a big events, and people felt like it was their brewery. We did that for 5 years. We did lots of community events and make special beers for different things that are happening in the town. Then when we wanted to expand the brewery, move it into a new space, rather than going to the bank and saying, could you lend us some money, we went to the community and said, we're going to convert this business into 100% community-owned business, and this is your opportunity to invest in and to own this brewery and to help it happen. We raised nearly £200,000 from 270 investors who actually are now the owners. We have 270 owners of that business, and we're now a business where we're one of the first 100% community-owned breweries. So it kind of makes business sense as well, because those 270 people are then out there saying, oh, it's great, it's fantastic. My brewery, that is, I helped to make that happen.
I really like this model of Wikipedia. It's how could we avoid actually had, and we know that what happened when you have had sponsor, you are not the freedom to do so. So actually, that's normal if Jim Wells, for instance, come as pop-up when you go on the web page and said, please give me $1 or €1, for instance, because we want to survive and we want to contribute. So that's a simple crowdfunding issue to do that. And who nowadays goes into the Oxford Dictionary to looking for something and so on and so forth? Everybody goes to Wikipedia. So thanks to the contributors, thanks to the readers, thanks to the donators as well, we have this kind of common sense, common good, and people contribute for free. They spend hours and hours to do that. They find that they can say that I don't have any time to do something. But when you give a sense to the people, they find the times, the patience to do something very good and very reliable, which is Wikipedia, for instance.
What if we rise until the 5 degrees? Because the temperature, if it rises until 5 degrees, for example, when we're talking about permaculture, agriculture, there are studies saying that above 5 degrees, we can't do any agriculture anymore. How can we still try to build utopias that could adapt to this challenge? Or what could we imagine if we rise above the 5 degrees when no innovation more is possible? Or what could we think about it? So what could we have for solutions if we should rise until that?
I truly believe, and I believe on human side, I truly believe on human species that they will be able to develop something. So I'm living in Singapore, and in Singapore there are very lots of constraints. There is absolutely zero natural resources, and they have to feed people actually. So for agricultures, they developed, that was the first time that they developed vertical farming. So vertical farming that you can do that. They use a very, very low electricity, almost nothing, because they use solar panel to give the energy to the very rotation vertical farm. So they use the sun, they use just a little water, and they use a very small piece of land to do that. So I truly believe that, I don't want to go to the 5 degrees, above 5 degrees, but I truly believe that within the next years, it's definitely possible to find different innovative way to avoid the five degree?
My sense is that that actually above 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees, we will really, really struggle. Like 5 degrees is utterly catastrophic. The last time in the UK the temperature was 5 degrees lower than it is now, we had 3 kilometers of ice above our head. It's a huge, I think sometimes we can convince ourselves that human beings are so extraordinarily brilliant and innovative that we can innovate our way through anything. I think by the time we're living, there is also a huge social justice aspect to this. Yes, it might be possible that very wealthy people in the West might be able to innovate their way through climate change, but there's no way at 5 degrees we're going to have 7 billion, 8 billion people on this planet all being innovative. What would happen is we would have such a completely catastrophic scenario. 4 degrees, we've gone up 1.1 degrees and we're already seeing feedbacks that are starting to kick in. We should be aiming to get back to 350 parts per million, which is the safe concentration. We're currently at 412 and it's kind of accelerating. So for me, it's the innovation comes from saying, we have to stay below 1.5. We need to get down. We need to be finding, the innovation that really excites me is stuff like the carbon locking up potential of kelp farming, is the potential of rewilding, is the potential of helping our seas become the carbon sinks again that they used to be before, is about reforestation, is about ways of growing food that put more carbon back into the soil, and having a culture. That's such extraordinary responsible innovation for me is that kind of, how do we because I don't want to live in a 5 degree, well, I don't think I will be living in a 5 degree, I don't be living in a 3 degree world. I just don't think that's even going to be feasible. So for me, I just think we have to, although the window of opportunity is very small, I think we have to throw everything that we can. Everybody should be coming out of this university like familiar with permaculture and thinking and with all of those sort of tools they need to be able to go, right, okay, we do this. How does any business I go and work in become a genuinely regenerative business, which is about connecting to place and is about completely thinking in a different way? Because we, as human beings, we have such sometimes a kind of arrogance that actually any problem we can solve because we're so brilliant. I remember Vandana Shiva, very famous Indian activist on food campaigning, said that she once went to a Monsanto GM conference and she said, but what about the soil? And the guy said, oh, we won't need soil. It's like, you're a psychopath. What are you talking about? We don't need soil. Of course we need soil. And so my sense is I try to throw everything I can at how we might get to be a 1.5 degree world rather than how we innovate in a 5 degree world, because that's like science fiction, Blade Runner, Mad Max stuff.
What kind of advice will you give to us and to all the students here?
With Rob, we've discussed about it. It's why we do the things we do. That's very important. So it's important, again, to go back to the mindset one. Why we do the thing we do, it's very important. And to me, that's why the philosophical question should take place in our school as well as in our own minds. Is it about fortune? Is it about glory? Do you want to be rich? Do you want to get power? Why we do the things we do? Those kind of questions dates back the ancient philosophy. Epicurus, Plato, Aristotle, Stoicism, Epicureanism, as well as cynicism, for instance. They worked on those kind of questions. And I truly believe that we need to go back to those kind of issues, those kind of questions, and to integrate those kind of approach in our modern world, in our modern innovation process. That's why I truly believe that we can take care of the planet, we can take care of our client as well, we can take care to our all stakeholders if we know why we do the things we do.
That your time in a university like this should be a kind of dress rehearsal for living in a way that is a really sustainable way. So when I walked up here and we're walking past everywhere where there's grass that's growing should be trees and gardens and food that's being grown and that's being served here. This university should use it's the amount of money that it spends every year to buy in food to feed everybody, to buy in goods and resources for people. It should be a real driver for the economic reimagining of the economy around this place. It should be 100% renewably powered. It should have no plastic in it. It should have ways of getting here. It should be working. We were talking about this, about trying to move away from that model of saying, oh, so when you finished here, you need to go and do an internship in Tokyo, and then you need to go and do your training in Amsterdam, and then go to whatever. It's like we need to be moving beyond flying as being a basic understanding of how we do everything. So it should be that when you leave here, you aren't still going, what would it look like if we to live in a sustainable way in a sustainable world? That's what you've done for the last 3 years, and it became completely commonplace and completely everyday. And you always had a water bottle with you, and you never used plastic, and you had the food was great, and it all came from this area, and you understood why, and you where it came from, and you knew the stories. And that feels to me like universities should be absolutely a showcase of all of this stuff in practice. It should be that maybe rather than having a year where you go away and you do an internship somewhere else, maybe you stay here and you start an enterprise that operates out of here. So this university actually, rather than just teaching people about business, people start businesses that work from here and that are part of this whole process. So this university, sustainability shouldn't be like an academic pursuit. It should be like a daily practice that after a while, like riding a bicycle or swimming, after a while you stop thinking, how do I do this again? It just becomes just how you do, like breathing or walking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.